Welcome to this Arnall-Culliford knitwear tutorial on the tubular cast on in the round. This video forms part of our Boost Your Knitting Another Year of Techniques series, and if you'd like to find out more about the book, the designers, techniques or projects found within it, along with all the yarns required to make the projects, do visit our website acknitwear.co.uk. The tubular cast on is one of my favourite all-time techniques. It's that magical combination of stretchy but yet not floppy. It's got a firm, sturdy edge and it's perfect for ribbing. I'm going to show you how to do the 1x1 tubular cast on in the round, but you can do a 2x2 cast on in a very similar way. You just switch the order in which you do your knits and purls. These are the Totally Tubular Mittens by Sarah Hatton, and they are the third project in Boost Your Knitting, and we're going to use them to learn how to do this great cast on technique. In order to work a 1x1 tubular cast on in the round, I have cast on half of my required number of stitches with some waste yarn. I've joined those stitches into the round and I've worked 2 rounds as purl. I find that it helps to have a little bit of the waste yarn work below the edge, as that helps when I'm coming to join my tubular cast on edge in a minute, as you'll see. So for this project I required 48 stitches once I've completed the tubular cast on, so we've cast on 24 stitches with the waste yarn. Having worked my 2 rounds in purl, I've now joined in my main yarn by knotting it gently to the waste yarn. I'll be undoing that knot later and weaving the end in. And I'm now ready to work with my main yarn. And the first thing that I need to do is to purl 3 rounds with the main yarn. So I'm just completing the 3 purl rounds. Obviously I'm demonstrating this using double pointed needles, but you can work this cast on method in exactly the same way if you're working with magic loop or a small circular needle or any type of needles for working in the round. Right, so that's the end of my 3 rounds of purl worked in the main yarn. I'm now slipping the marker that shows the start of the round, and I'm going to purl the first stitch of the new round. And now we get the clever bit of the tubular cast on. Can you see that down here where we've got the waste yarn meeting the main yarn, we've got a loop of main yarn sitting below the 2 loops of the waste yarn. What we're going to do is we're going to use our right hand needle tip to go down and pick up that main yarn loop that was sitting directly underneath the next stitch. We pick it up from top to bottom and we then lift that loop onto the left hand needle tip. And then we're going to knit that loop. So we're essentially going to work along our set of stitches, purling the live stitches off the double pointed needles and then picking up main yarn loops from where they meet the waste yarn to create our knit stitches. Purl the next stitch on your needles and then bring the yarn to the back ready to knit, and then using your right needle tip from top to bottom, pick up the main yarn loop where it met the waste yarn and slide it onto your left needle tip and then knit it. So as you work along the row, you're working the purl stitches from the main needles and you're creating the knit stitches from the loops of main yarn where they meet the waste yarn at the cast on edge. oops, needs to be the main yarn loop that's attached to the waste yarn. So we're coming to the end of our round and we've got 2 purl stitches remaining on the left needles. So we're going to purl the penultimate stitch. And then here we've got the final full loop of main yarn where it meets the waste yarn. I'm going to pick that up as normal, slip it to the left-hand needle, sorry, and then knit into it. And we then purl the final stitch on the left needle. Now, the last loop that we're going to pick up is slightly hidden in here. You can see here we've got the last waste yarn stitch. It's quite a big waste yarn stitch, and on the left-hand side of it we've got main yarn that waste yarn goes through, and it's that main yarn in there that we're going to pick up. You may find it helpful to untie your main yarn from your waste yarn if you did tie them together at the beginning. That might be obscuring it a little bit, in which case by all means untie it. Nothing's going to unravel if you do that. But we are going to, in exactly the same way as previously, we're going to use the right hand needle to pick up that main yarn loop. So we've dug into it from top to bottom, and on the right hand side of it you can see the waste yarn is going through that main yarn loop, and that's the bit of main yarn you're looking to pick up. And then you just slip it onto the left hand needle as normal and knit into that loop. We've now come to the end of the round marker, and we're going to remove the end of the round marker and purl what was the first stitch of the round. And now we're going to replace the start of round marker. And now we're set up, ready to work 1 by 1 rib in the round, starting with a knit stitch. And I'm going to work a couple of rounds in 1 by 1 rib, and then I'll show you how to remove the waste yarn edge so that you can see your beautiful tubular cast on. I've now worked a couple of rounds of 1 by 1 rib after my tubular cast on, and I'm now ready to remove the waste yarn so that you can see the nice edge that the tubular cast on creates. And I do that very simply by snipping the waste yarn out. Obviously you do need to take a little bit of care to make sure that you're not cutting through your main yarn. Take the time to check each section before you squeeze your scissors together. But you just work round and remove all the waste yarn. I've used a smooth mercerized cotton for my waste yarn. That's my waste yarn of choice because it doesn't stick to the main yarn, it doesn't felt or anything like that. It's nice and slippery and easy to take out when the time comes. I'm going to untie the knot where we joined our main yarn to our waste yarn. That was just to keep the tension even at the beginning. Once we've finished snipping out the waste yarn, you can see that your stitches on that cast on edge seem to grow out of nowhere. They sort of fold round and the edge is ever so neat. It looks very similar to the edge of a machine knitted fabric. It's called a tubular cast on because there's actually a narrow channel along that cast on edge where those 3 rounds that you purled, where they're folded over, then that makes a little tube through that cast on edge. And you can see here where we started the round, we've got our main yarn tail that we will weave in later, and that will be a really neat smooth edge there. Once we've worked further on in our project, you can see that that cast on edge now with the tubular cast on works really neatly into the 1x1 rib, and then in this mitten design by Sarah Hatton, the stitch pattern then also grows straight out of the 1x1 rib, and the result is really very pleasing. It just makes a really professional finish to your cast on edge. Thank you for watching our video on the tubular cast on in the round. I hope you are now feeling confident to try the tubular cast on next time you're casting on in the round for a project that starts with some rib. If you'd like to find out more about Boost Your Knitting, do visit our website acknitwear.co.uk. And if you'd like to be sure of seeing all of our knitting tutorial videos, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jen AC Knitwear. Thanks ever so much for watching.